I'll try not to butcher this. I'll tell you a quick story. In England, in the 1900s, there were two shoe salesmen, and these two shoe salesmen got sent down to Africa. I forget the name of the company that they worked for, but they got sent down to Africa on a business. Back then, they didn't have the term business development. They got sent down on a business development mission, and so. As the story goes, I had a copy of their transcript. Back in those days, they sent telegrams. So the first guy arrived, and he said, there's nothing doing down here. They don't wear shoes. Stop. End of telegram. And the next guy, who arrived a little while later, sent his telegram back, and he said, glorious opportunity. They don't wear any shoes. So that's the story. I tell that because when I started, and I understand, is everybody kind of fairly new to the sales floor within the first year or so? So when I started in 1994 at Langley Chrysler, and when I started there, that was selling cars, which is what I started out doing, was not really a thing that was, proud to be doing. I don't think that I think a lot of people looked at that opportunity, not as an opportunity, but as that first shoe salesman sent down to Africa looked at that opportunity. Like, I'm here, they don't wear shoes, what's the point of this? Let's get the hell out of here. I looked at the opportunity back then. I still look at this today. I refresh myself just about daily with this, at the opportunity that exists in this business and what a glorious opportunity it is. So when we've got in current day all of the experts and the news updates and the prognosticators saying, the dealership doesn't have long to live, we're moving to a direct consumer model like a Tesla or a Rivian. We can interact directly with the consumer. I call those disruptors. I see those as they exist today. I saw those in a different form 10 years ago. I saw them in an entirely different form 20 years ago. And Chris, you've probably seen that through your entire career in this business from coast to coast and in every country you go into. I look at those things as opportunities. So as I sit here today, after coming through COVID, and kind of take inventory of what we've got, what we have here, what is this opportunity? What is the purpose of a dealership? Why do we exist? I'm as optimistic and bullish about it today as I was when I started in 1994. And the way I tell the story is on that first day that I started, I had to kind of, at Langley Chrysler, where the side, you come in the driveway and you got the ramp, side doors, or I guess effectively the front door. But I had to kind of break my way through the smoke circle in those days that existed there of a bunch of cronies hanging around, waiting for the up bus to deliver their next opportunity. So I kind of got a cold shower indoctrination into probably a lot of the ugly parts of this business that people have seen over the years that are underwhelming, and I was underwhelmed for a long time. But back to the shoe salesman, in looking at the opportunity that exists, in facing the threats back then and the threats today that exist out there, the thing I always bring it back to is, what are we doing? Why do we exist? Technically speaking, I define us as middlemen in business terms. Our OEMs and our brands manufacture and produce products, and there are end user consumers that want to buy those products. So those are kind of the two ends of the transaction that exists, and then somewhere in the middle of that, we insert ourselves as a dealership or a distributor or whatever you want to call us. So Tesla would tell you, Elon Musk would tell you, or the people at Rivian would tell you, why should we slow down that process and clutter it up and gum it up and raise the cost of our product by putting a middleman in the center of that transaction? And so in understanding that business model of how we come to be as a dealership or as a network of dealerships or a distribution network that goes across Canada and the United States, I think we need to be able to answer that question in the middle of that. Why do we exist as a dealership? And so that kind of is the introduction to what I want to really talk to you about today. This document was collaborated upon and developed over 30 years. We officially coined it in 2017 in the current format that it's in, but I like to use it for our discussion today because I think it helps govern a lot of the questions that I was just posing or asking about why we exist. So I think that if we're going to have a compelling reason or a vision or offer the consumer or offer our manufacturers a good reason for our existence other than to receive cars off car carriers, clean them up and distribute them out the back door, I think anybody can do that. There's got to be a more compelling reason about why we exist. So enter this document. When I'm looking as an organization to think about why we exist, one of the reasons I think that's critical in understanding that is knowing what our purpose is. So you can define a purpose as, I've heard it been defined as a why we exist. What is kind of our greater purpose? And prior to this document in our employee handbook, that document started out with, we're in the people business and we happen to sell cars. Because I don't look at this thing that we're doing like you sell Ford product, you sell Dodge product, you sell Toyota product, you sell Hyundai product, or anything else like that. I look at it like we are a team of people, a team to be clear, and we exist in our purpose that I've defined as enriching people's lives. So let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. What's a purpose? Why should you care what a purpose is? Why would a customer care what a purpose is? So at the top of this document, I call this our bicycle spoke that's at the top. And on the end of every spoke on that wheel is what I call a stakeholder. And a stakeholder is someone that has a vested interest in your business or in you. So when we look at that, in our world, it's our team, first and foremost. Everybody here has got a vested interest in who we are and what we do and why we do it. We've got our customer, obviously, so we'll start with the most obvious stakeholders that are there. We've got our suppliers. So suppliers could be, in that category, I would put General Motors or Ford or FCA or Toyota or Hyundai, whoever our OEMs are. But we have more than just those suppliers. We have suppliers that supply us aftermarket parts. They supply us, the auction would supply us used cars. So our suppliers. All of our stores are located in and operate in communities. So a community is a stakeholder. And so that's connected to the why. Why does a community care that we exist there? What do we do? How do we serve? How do we add value? How do we benefit the community? We've got our partners, of which we've got two here today. Chris Schultes is a partner. Strategically, he delivers and supports all of our teams with training. He works in collaboration with Matt Gould. Matt Gould does the same thing, and he delivers and supports and helps us develop our leadership for our leaders, for all of our people And he's been the originator of our Leadership Academy, which has spawned off kind of immeasurable other programs and initiatives. So our partners. So we're aligned with our partners. I hope we're delivering the same message. We're on the same page. If anyone's ever talking about that, being on the same page, hopefully this is the one. That's the page we're on together. They're a critical part of our business and our success and our relationships. And then last but not least, our families. So we're aware that we don't do this alone. None of us do. So whether it's a spouse, whether you've got parents, whether you've got kids, whoever it is that make up your family, they're supporting you, you're supporting them, and we're supporting everybody. So when we go around that wheel and we look at all of those stakeholders, and there's more, these are just some examples of what our stakeholders are, then I like to connect us to what our purpose is, which is enriching people's lives. So if I could go through, again, every one of those stakeholders one more time, I could hopefully tell you many different ways in which that we're enriching the lives of each of those stakeholders. So it is critical in our purpose as to why we exist. We are not an automotive dealership distributor that receives cars and cleans them and kicks them out the door to a customer. It is much greater than that. So I want to, if nothing else today, just connect everybody to why we exist, what our purpose is, what does it mean to enrich people's lives. And that can be small little things, that can be huge, big initiatives. That could be our Tag Cares Fund, that can be our community involvement. That can be things like doing a grand opening at Comox Valley Dodge, and Reese and Krizia come over there and help support the team open that store up. Naz is out supporting all of our stores, all of our teams, all of our leaders, all of our team members in delivering hopefully what is amounting to an exceptional employment experience. Chris and Matt are continually supporting our teams through things like this, being available to consult, have a coaching call, have a meeting, have a dinner, talk about anything related to your well-being and your development. Recently, coming through the pandemic, mental health is a big deal. Making sure everybody's supported. We've got a benefits plan that provides support for people, for employees. Do they need help? Do they need somebody to talk to? That's there as a support. So as I go around that wheel, when we talk about, before I go off of that, relationships with Ford, relationships with Chrysler. I love telling these stories because back when I started, what I used to witness with my bosses in the day were that you would have your people from the factory that would come to visit the store, and they would always be coming on a regular basis to try and sell you more inventory, take more inventory. I know in this room, I know that you guys maybe don't relate to that after the last couple of years, but back then we had more than we could handle. Anyway, so they were always treated terribly by the general managers, usually by the dealers. And they'd roll their eyes, and they'd kind of hunch over, and they'd go back into their office. They'd sometimes hide out for a bit before they'd let the rep know that they were in the store at the same time. And finally, the rep would be let in, come into the office, and they'd go through this song and dance, and the rep would try and shake them down for more inventory. And then the dealer would kind of complain. And then, anyway, they would do this whole dance. The rep would leave. And then before they were even out the door, most of the time I would overhear the general manager complaining about having to have spent that half hour or an hour with that rep and what he's done to us and what we have to do and how terrible things are. So the reason I tell that story is because I kind of take a different approach to that. Back then I was observing that going, wow, that's interesting. Does it have to be that way? Do our relationships with those reps have to be acrimonious like that? And shouldn't they be there to support us and we can support them? Anyway, so as we got going with it, I kind of took a different approach to the reps. And when they came, we would welcome them in, and we would get the keys to their car. They would always be driving a company car, and we would very quickly take it out back. We'd get it detailed for them. We'd usually change their oil. He'd come in and meet with us, and we'd talk about what we had to talk to, all the necessary evils that you have to go through, and all of those things. And then he would leave, and he'd get his car back, and it would actually be cleaned, detailed, oil changed, and full of gas, and he would go. And he would, leave there. And I think he would then go on to the next store along his stops, along his pathway. And he would get that other experience that I talked about to start with. So anyway, it doesn't matter. That's just something, in our relationships of enriching people's lives, of delivering an experience and engaging with him wholeheartedly, where this can be a really cool experience. So fast forward 25 years, and we're in the midst of an acquisition. The deal gets done and written, and it goes to head office in Windsor, and then Windsor looks at it and they evaluate the merits of it, and they determine whether they're going to approve that deal to move forward or whether they're not. So that deal was stuck on the desk of the dealer development manager in Windsor. And it was stuck because the Trotman Group had too many dealerships already in British Columbia, too many Chrysler stores. We already had 3. And we were in contravention of a rule that they had put in that they didn't want one group owning too many stores of the same brand. So they were having a hard time saying no to the outgoing guy that had sold the store, and they didn't want to say no to us, but ultimately that's where it sat. So I phoned Matt, Brannigan was his name, and I talked to him, and sure enough, after a 15-minute conversation and some assurances from me about how we were going to conduct ourselves and what we wanted to do with the store, he moved it off the side of his desk onto the front, stamped the approve button, and away it went. And that guy was the guy whose car I washed in 1998, filled up with gas. It doesn't matter that happened or that was the guy. I share the story to illustrate that you don't have to do something because you want something back for it. Do it because we're enriching people's lives. Do it connected to what our purpose is. Take an example like that and do it for a customer. And the only way it works and why we've really carefully crafted that sentence of 3 words, enriching people's lives, is not because I want something in return for it, because I don't. But I do understand how karma works and how the universe works and how energy works. And when you give something out to it and you invest something positive and something energetic towards something that's in the spirit of enriching the lives of somebody else, then that thing works its way around in serendipity. And I don't know where it's going to show up or how it's going to show up. I just know some way, somehow, at some distant point in the future, it just might. So I like to take our chances on investing in that up front. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you around our purpose and why it exists and who our stakeholders are. And the question in this portion of the discussion I would leave you with is, what can you do? What can you do to enrich others' lives? And this isn't just a customer. It could be a coworker. It could be anyone in our stakeholders circle. It can be a small thing. It can be at Starbucks in the morning, buying a coffee for the person that's behind you in line. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Just, that's my challenge out to everybody. That's my question as you leave here. What can you do to enrich people's lives and be aligned in that purpose? So what's very closely aligned to that purpose, the other thing that's critical, are what our values are. And you've probably seen these things. They've been emblazoned on books. They're on this document. They're on the walls of our dealerships. I'm really careful about what values are, because I've been through a world where it was a it was a trendy thing to do in business through the 90s and the early 2000s, through the dot-com era, where companies would have values. They'd have a mission statement. They'd have usually a bunch of, I call them corporate buzzwords, that they would put out. They would design posters and pop them up on the wall. And they would kind of be able to check a box to say, we've got values, and there's what they are, and our people know what they are, and there you go. We didn't want to do that. So we struggled for many years with trying to figure out, how do we want to articulate ourselves? Why do we want to do it? We spent a year in rooms like this with 75 to 80 of our team debating. If you ask any of our leaders that were in there at the time, we had great debates on what our values should be. Is it worth having them? Why bother with them? Doesn't it just complicate things? We're here just to sell cars. We're here just to service cars. Why should we bother with values? So, in answer to that question, I believe that why it's important to have values is that they are a definition that governs how we believe we should act and behave. So they need to be defined with verbs, with actions. They need to be able to answer a question for any of you when you don't know what to do. What do I do? Where should I go? Your leader, your team lead's not available, and you think you know what you want to do, you're not sure what you want to do. That's what these things are for. Read these, connect with these, and they'll give you the answer of what you should do. So those were the reasons why we thought it was important to have them. Then it became not just about having them, it became, how are we going to define them? How are we going to language these things? So back to my first example of having witnessed all of, and we'd gone and studied Google and Disney and Apple and all the big Fortune 500 companies that had these values that were out there. And everybody said, okay, we can't have corporate buzzwords that people can't remember, or definitions that don't make sense, or that are just kind of too slick to make sense. So we agreed we're going to have plain language. We're going to have short phrases. And the guy that helped us over the course of the year determine what these were wanted less, not more. Less words, not more words. Less values, not more values. He encouraged us to have 3, and for each value to have 3 words in it. Stop. That was it. And so we debated and battled that out for the better part of a year. And we couldn't get it down to 3 because we just didn't feel like it represented us wholly and fully with what they were. So anyway, we agreed to disagree with him. We're going to have 4. This is what they're going to be. We'll get it down to real words in plain language, hopefully that's easy to remember, and we'll go with those. So be awesome. This is in no particular order because these can be interchanged at any point in time. Very quickly, we defined that as adding massive value. So these things are all connected back to the purpose. If you look at them, read the definitions, think about what I shared with you with the purpose. Hopefully, it goes together like a jigsaw puzzle and it all makes sense. But focus on giving, innovating, and adding value, taking massive action to fulfill our potential. So my goal in supporting all of our teams, supporting everybody here, supporting our leaders, our stakeholders, and everyone else, is that you can be your best self. We need to give you and provide the tools so that you can be your best self. That's the goal. Add massive value to you. Hopefully you will add massive value to your customer, our stakeholders, your family. It doesn't matter who it is, but that's what the point of it is. So in being awesome, we're trying to get in touch with what does it mean, other than everybody's heard the word. Everybody kind of probably has their own version of what that is. And that is open to interpretation, but I think we thought it was important to define it. So be awesome, have fun. it's important to enjoy the journey. We thought that we don't want to leave this out. This was the one that was being encouraged to edit out and to leave on the cutting room floor. And I think that we fought for it to be included because we know it's important. Everybody's under pressure. Everybody spends the lion's share of their life and their waking hours devoted to their craft and their work and the company that you're working at. So we think it's important to enjoy what you're doing. Enjoy it with your coworkers. Create an atmosphere in all of our stores with intention. So one question I like to leave people with, wake up in the morning, is I ask myself the question, what can I give this morning when I wake up? I know there's a lot of folks out there that ask the opposite to that. What can I get? It's a cold, hard world out there. It's competitive. It's aggressive. I got to hit the ground running and be ready to roll. So what am I going to go get today? That's certainly a way to approach it. I like the inverse of that. Focus on what you can give. Focus on enriching people's lives. Focus on adding massive value. And I would put out to you that watch what happens. Do it and watch what happens. We challenge our teams to show up every day as their authentic selves. Take calculated risks. My brother Brad put this in at the end and let her rip. Be yourself. Show up. Be your authentic personality and add value that way. This isn't about, being corporate, being a corporation. We can be considered that legally, but that's not how we act and behave. Hopefully we do it in a professional way, but the idea is bring it. Bring your full self and show up. Every single person here's got a unique gift to add to the cocktail. Add to your clients, add to your coworkers. And this is, again, one thing I think that's important to distinguish here. When you've got how many people have heard the word culture before? It's important. So first and foremost, a culture. What's a culture? Every company has one. So here's the thing about culture. Whether you like it or not, whether you intend it or not as a company, you have a culture. So if you're going to have one regardless, why not make it intentional? Why not show up and create it the way you want it to be? This isn't for the company to do. The culture is a mosaic of everybody that's within it. It's what you bring to it. What value can you add to it? And there's too many times in my early career, and every day, it happens all the time, where I've gone in to managers' offices and heard them complaining about the customer, complaining about the salesperson that didn't get all the information on the worksheet. In the service department, advisors running into the office of the service manager, complaining about heat scores, writing people off. I can not remember one situation. I have been 28 years now that we've not been able to find a solution and make a client happy. I can't remember one. So I think a lot of the problems that we encounter are our own doing, our attitude in how we show up. I think we light our own hair on fire. I think we show up with bad language, and I think that we're the author of our own issues and our own problems. So I always like to reverse engineer the responsibility, put it back on myself and say, who am I not being that this client is showing up like this? Why are we referring to them as a heat score? Did you refer to your mother, brother, father, aunt, or uncle that's a customer of the dealership? Would you refer to them as a heat score? Probably not. So what happens when we set the table with that label as an advisor? So I just ask questions. And I think you can probably infer from the question that there may be a better solution. There may be a better answer with how we approach that challenge. How do we approach a difficult customer? How do we approach a customer that doesn't want to follow our process? Best selves are, that's what this is. This is not to say we're like this all the time. This is to say, This is the goal. This is what we espouse to be acting and behaving like. Show love. Nobody wanted to put the L word down, but we got it. It's on there. In the car industry, nobody was using the L word, let alone any, most other corporate boardrooms out there. So we define that as care passionately, but I think what's important about it is that, along the lines of everything else I was describing, we show up and we care. And we care with energy and with passion. We're driven by passion and deeply care about each other, our guests, our communities. We expect quality in all aspects of our people, our work, and our delivery of service. So once again, hopefully that puzzle piece fits perfectly in with what our purpose is, how we're showing up, defining what we're bringing to the table. When Matt Gould is talking to our Leadership Academy workshops or coaching with different people, here's one of the things we've always shared and talked about, is that every person in a relationship is only there for 50% of it. So, Chris, you show up and you're in this room and you came for 3 days to facilitate a world-class workshop in support of our people. You're responsible for 50% of that. Everybody else here individually is responsible for their 50. So the question becomes in this document is, how much of your 100 are you showing up with? Hopefully it's all 100. Most people don't show up with their 100. I got 50 today. I'm bringing 50 into my half. And things start breaking down at that point. We were inspired by a Navy SEAL commander named Jocko Willink. If anybody's heard of him, he's out there on the podcast circuit. When he was in Iraq and was commanding a unit, a lot of his colleagues would go in to the admiral meeting. They would kind of get wrung out. What's wrong? Why has that mission failed? What's going on? Why is that not working? And so most of them would say, well, this is why. Opposite to what the values are, kind of, that's wrong, this is wrong, blame this, blame that, the equipment's not good, and if you could just get us this, we could that. Jocko took a different mindset to that, and he said, forget about it. They're my team. It's up to me to figure out their gear. It's on me to get better gear. It's on me to find a way around the bureaucracy of the military system to go out there and get that. So after he had had his initial meeting and got dressed down about whatever their lack of execution was in the field, I think he said to himself, this is never going to happen again. And he basically just stood up and said, I own this from here forward. And he geared his team up. And I don't know how he did it. He went and he resourced his way around and got them what they needed. But the next time he was in front of the admirals, then the story was a little bit different. The results were different and what he did was different. But he didn't have to do that. That's not on him. Military budget is not on the generals on the field. Lack of equipment is not his fault. But he didn't care. It wasn't about blaming and pointing fingers or what the fault was or what the bureaucracy was or why it didn't happen. So anyway, we were inspired by that story and said, how can we translate that to ourselves, our world, in the automotive world, in what we do and what our challenges are every day? And I think we just coined the phrase own it to say, that was what he termed extreme ownership. Something that you don't need to do. It's not your responsibility, but you go and you resource your way and you find a way to do it anyway. Take ownership of everything in our world, sweat the details. We're a focused, unified team and 100% responsible for our failures and our successes. This is the conundrum about being a leader. This is the hard thing for the leaders on our teams, in our stores, is that they bear responsibility. It's up to them to own the responsibility of the failure. So they get to do that, and then when success happens, they give it away. Success gets given away and celebrated by everybody else. So what the Own It value really is about is to say, what can we all do to take control of the situation and make it better, engineer another outcome? Even if you don't have the tools, even if whatever roadblock that you're encountering that you have to find a way to get over top of, figure it out. So this is kind of our way of saying you're empowered to figure it out. Whatever it is you need to do, you're empowered to figure it out. Because we can't game plan and vision and pre-write every roadblock that you're going to encounter. So take the inspiration from Jocko or whoever it is that you know that personifies this value and own that thing. So here's the last thing I'll leave you with, and then we can have questions or just open it up for a discussion, Chris, or however you want to do it. In the car industry, I think the thing that I want to acknowledge or have everybody understand is, if you work for another store or another group, I would highly doubt whether there's a document like this that exists. Probably not. I haven't seen many or any others. I don't want you to see this document or hear my words today as a burden upon you. The spirit in which this document was created, I hope, was to make things more clear, to define healthy behavior, to define actions that we think are valuable to take. This document integrates really well with training, with sales training, with what you're doing with Chris, but it's a different thing. There's sales training that all of us need to do and need to practice and need to hone our skills and get better at. When I started in 1994, the first month I was on the floor, I was scared shitless because all I heard was what Jim Pattison did in the decades leading up to that. Lowest guy on the totem pole gets fired every month. I just had to figure out how to not be the lowest guy on the sticker board, because that was what was imminently going to happen. So I gave a talk last week about the motivating power of fear. So for me, that's what it was. Just don't be last. So as I kind of struggled to find my way, 2.5, 3 years on the floor selling cars in the mid-90s, I was kind of doing that and being mistreated and not being trained and not having access. We didn't have iPhones back then. We really didn't even have, we barely had email. I don't think we were using it. The internet was barely a thing. Like, there just wasn't many places to go to try and figure out what to do and how to do it. And I knew for sure that my bosses didn't have it and they didn't know the answers and they weren't giving it to us. So, but what I did think about is there's got to be a better way to do this. It doesn't have to be a fear-based organization that is the motivator, the stick that causes you to act and behave and to take action. So I think that this is a long way of saying, coming full circle back to this document is kind of the antithesis of what my first 10 years in this business were about, which was underwhelming at best. Chris has probably shared a lot of war stories with you in all of the doorways he's been in over the years across the country, and what you see and what's out there. And so I think what I've learned is not to worry about those other places, the down the road motors and the competition that exists out there. If we get inside ourselves and we focus internally on really being good, on being world class, my challenge to myself is be the best at what you do. Be world class at what you do, and then ask questions after that. Give. Figure it out. How can I add more value? How can I enrich people's lives? How can I hone my own skills? How can I get better at what I'm doing? And then see what happens.